I stood motionless before my father's portrait in the small church in Dundalk, feeling as though the entire world was slowly crumbling around me. My father, Raymond Dillard, had been a gentle, hard-working janitor who lived his whole life in quiet humility. In that black and white photograph, he still wore the same soft smile, the crow's feet around his eyes and his snow-white hair unchanged, as if he were still looking at me with the same warm, forgiving gaze he always had. He had passed suddenly from a heart attack just 3 days earlier, leaving me, Marcus Dillard, 32 years old, an elevator repair technician with a grief I could not put into words. Today's church was truly simple and cold. The old wooden pews held only a scattering of people. The faint scent of incense mingled with the musty smell of rain-soaked earth from this little town of Dundalk. My mother, Joanne Dillard, 60 years old, stood close beside the coffin. She was the kindest, most loving woman I had ever known, always giving unconditional love to her husband and son. She wore a plain black dress, her silver hair neatly pinned up, trying to keep her composure as she received the few mourners who came to offer condolences. Yet I could clearly see her thin hands trembling as they rested on the pine coffin lid. She was choking back sobs, tears rolling down her cheeks. Yet she still managed weak smiles and words of thanks for each person. There were only a handful of close neighbors and a few of Dad's old co-workers from Hartman Industries. The funeral was truly modest, no lavish flowers, no expensive wreaths, just a few bunches of white daisies I had hurriedly bought from the corner market. While everyone quietly prayed, my eyes kept drifting to the old iron gate outside the churchyard. I was waiting for my wife's family to arrive. Hazel, my wife, had promised she would come with her parents, Ernest and Lorraine Montgomery. Last night on the phone she had said it clearly, her voice sweet. "I'll be there, honey, and Mom and Dad too. Don't worry so much." I had believed her. I thought that no matter what, today was my father's funeral, her father-in-law's funeral. They would show up if only for appearances to act like a proper family. But the minutes dragged on, and still no familiar figures appeared at the gate. The fragile hope inside me slowly turned into heavy disappointment, then into crushing despair. I told myself maybe they were stuck in traffic, maybe something unexpected had come up. I tried to stay calm, but my heart beat faster and faster. I took out my phone and called Hazel. It rang for a long time before she answered. "Hello, honey." Her voice came through, but distant, mixed with music and cheerful laughter in the background. I forced myself to sound calm. "Hazel, where are you?" "The funeral has started. They're about to lower Dad into the ground." "Oh, sweetie. Something urgent came up. I can't make it." "Sorry, okay?" Hazel answered indifferently and hung up without waiting for my reply. I stood frozen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the cold, endless dial tone. Something urgent? Today was the final farewell to my father, and she had something urgent? Was there really anything more important than attending her father-in-law's funeral? I called again. No answer. I tried Lorraine, my mother-in-law. She picked up on the first ring. "Hello, Marcus? Lorraine, are you all on the way? The service is happening. They're almost ready to bury him." A second of silence, then her reply, ice-cold and utterly unapologetic. "Oh, we're just too busy to come, dear. Ernest has an important golf game this weekend. And anyway, your father's already gone. Our being there wouldn't change anything, would it?" Behind her voice, I clearly heard glasses clinking, lively conversation, and Violet, Hazel's younger sister, shouting something cheerful. My heart stopped. A chilling numbness spread from my spine to my toes. They weren't coming. Not because of traffic. Not because of an accident. They simply didn't care to come. Because in their eyes, my father was just a lowly janitor. Not important enough for them to leave their weekend party. My mother stepped out of the church and looked at me. One glance and she understood everything. She took my hand, her hand ice-cold and trembling. "It's all right, son. It's just you and me," she whispered, voice breaking. She had long known how the Montgomerys looked down on us, yet like me, she had hoped that today at least they would be different. The neighbors exchanged quiet glances, whispers spread like a breeze. Mrs. Thompson, who had watched me grow up barefoot, leaned toward her husband and said sadly, "I never thought they'd stoop this low." In Dundalk, everyone knew. They knew how Lorraine had once sneered when she learned my father was just a janitor. They knew Ernest, my father-in-law, had told me I needed to try harder to be worthy of Hazel. But no one imagined their contempt could be this blatant, to skip an entire funeral. I swallowed my tears, swallowed the humiliation rising in my throat. I couldn't collapse now. I had to be strong for Mom, for Dad. I quickly wiped my face, went inside, and helped her sit down. The priest continued the prayers. I sat, but my mind was blank. Only one thought remained. They had insulted my father, even in death. When the coffin was carried to the hearse, a light rain began to fall. Cold droplets hit my face, mixing with tears I could no longer hold back. I walked behind the casket, one hand tightly holding Mom's, the other shielding her with a black umbrella. Only us and a few old neighbors. No Hazel, my wife. No Ernest and Lorraine, my in-laws. The hearse rolled slowly along the dirt road to the little cemetery. I looked out the window and watched the church disappear behind the curtain of rain. My heart felt hollow and unbearably alone. Dad, I'm sorry. I couldn't even protect your dignity on this final day, but I had no idea that this pain was only the beginning. A far greater, far more violent storm was waiting ahead. The funeral was nearing its end. We had carried my father's coffin from the church to the small cemetery on the outskirts of Dundalk, where old graves rested quietly beneath towering pines. The light drizzle had stopped, but the air remained damp and bitterly cold. Only a handful of people remained after the casket was lowered. My mother, Mrs. Thompson, and her husband, Mr. Thompson, an old friend of Dad's, and me. We were silently placing the last bouquets on the grave. The fresh mound of earth was still wet. The scent of soil mingled faintly with the fragrance of white daisies. I stood there, gripping the small shovel tightly, feeling as though my entire body had turned to lead, drained of all strength. Suddenly, from the dirt road leading into the cemetery came the low rumble of an engine. I looked up. A gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantom was slowly approaching, rolling over the rough ground. The weak, late afternoon sun glinted off its paint, making it shimmer like something from another world. Everyone turned to stare. In this humble cemetery, filled only with rusty pickups and battered motorcycles, the car stood out almost absurdly. The rear door opened. An elderly man stepped out. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, a long cashmere overcoat, and a dark silk tie. Tall silver hair neatly combed, his stern face radiated unmistakable authority, the bearing of someone accustomed to commanding empires. He leaned on an ebony cane topped with silver, walking slowly but firmly as if the entire cemetery belonged to him. My mother gave a small start, her hand tightening around mine. "Who is that, son?" "Could it be?" she whispered, voice trembling. Mrs. Thompson's mouth fell open. Her husband pushed his glasses up, eyes wide. The others exchanged stunned glances, unable to understand why someone so clearly wealthy would appear at the funeral of an ordinary janitor like my father. I recognized him instantly. My heart pounded. It was Franklin Hartman, 80 years old, chairman of the board of Hartman Industries, the largest technology and services conglomerate in the Northeast. The skyscraper my father had cleaned for 40 years was Hartman Industries' headquarters. I had seen his face in newspapers, on television, in long speeches about the vision of the future. But why was he here? Memories flooded back like a wave. When I was little, Mr. Hartman had visited our modest two-story house in Dundalk a few times, our front yard full of weeds. He arrived unannounced in a much older car than this one, bringing a store-bought cake or a box of toys his grandchildren no longer played with. He sat in our kitchen drinking tea with Dad, laughing heartily. "Raymond, you're still as stubborn as ever," he would say, and both men would burst into laughter. I was only 8 or 9, hiding under the table eavesdropping, not understanding why a rich man spoke to my father like a true friend. As I grew older, those visits became rare, then stopped altogether. I thought they were just hazy childhood memories. But now he was here, walking straight to my father's freshly lowered grave. Franklin Hartman stopped in front of the grave and stood silently for a long time. He said nothing. He only looked at the simple headstone, just the name, dates of birth and death, and the short line I had written myself. Beloved Father. His eyes were deep with sorrow that was hard to read, not polite sympathy but genuine grief, as if he had lost a part of himself. Those around us grew uneasy. No one dared speak. Only the wind in the pines and the rustle of leaves. Then he turned to my mother. He bowed. He bowed very low, a gesture of respect rarely seen from a man of his stature. "Joanne," he said, voice deep and warm but slightly trembling, "I am deeply sorry for Raymond's passing. He was a great man." My mother was stunned. She could only nod, tears rolling down again. "Thank you. Mr. Hartman, isn't it?" He nodded, then walked over to me. He placed a thin but firm hand on my shoulder. The hand was warm, but his gaze pierced me to the bone, as if he wanted to say 1,000 things but couldn't yet. "Marcus," he said softly, just for me, "your father was extraordinary. We need to talk privately." I could only nod, throat tight. Before turning away, he took a business card from his inner pocket, Hartman Industries silver-embossed logo, his name in raised lettering, and handed it to me. "When you're ready, call me. There are things about your father that you need to know, after everything here is finished." I took the card, hands shaking. "Yes, I will." He gave one final nod to everyone, then returned to the car. The Rolls-Royce glided silently away, leaving behind a small cloud of dust and a flood of unspoken questions. People began whispering. Mrs. Thompson leaned toward my mother. "My God, was that really Mr. Hartman? The big boss?" Mr. Thompson shook his head. "Raymond cleaned for him for years. How could—" Everyone looked at one another, unable to comprehend how a legendary billionaire could personally attend a humble janitor's funeral, bow deeply, and shed tears. I stood alone by the grave as the others slowly left. Rain began to fall again, lightly. I looked at the card in my hand, heart heavy. "Dad, who was Mr. Hartman to you? Why did he cry? Why did he call you a great man?" A whirlwind of questions spun in my head, piling on top of the pain of being scorned by the Montgomery family. I felt as if I were standing on the edge of a vast secret, a secret my father had taken with him to the grave. I don't know how long I stood there in the rain. Only when my mother gently touched my shoulder, her voice hoarse from the cold, "Let's go home, son, I'm exhausted," did I nod and help her into the family's old pickup truck. The entire drive back to Dundalk, mother and son were silent. Only the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers and the drumming of rain on the glass. By the time we reached the house, night had fallen completely. Our little 2-story home was exactly as we had left it that morning. Furniture draped in white cloths, a few funeral wreaths still fragrant with daisies, and Dad's portrait placed in the center of the living room. I helped Mom upstairs, made her a cup of hot tea. Then she quietly went to bed. She said nothing, but I knew she was hurting just as much as I was. I collapsed onto the sofa, my whole body drained. Hazel still wasn't home. The clock read 8 p.m., but to me it felt like midnight. I texted her, "Are you coming home today? I need you." No read receipt. I called. She had turned off her phone. The disappointment from earlier swelled into a choking lump in my throat. At that exact moment, the phone on the table lit up. Not a message from Hazel, but a live stream notification from Violet Montgomery, my sister-in-law. Without thinking, I tapped it. The screen showed the backyard of the Montgomery estate in Hunt Valley. Bright LED lights blazed, a long table covered in white linen, meat sizzling on a huge charcoal grill, EDM music thumping. Violet was holding the phone, spinning a 360-degree view, grinning ear to ear. "Hey everyone, the Montgomerys are having an epic family BBQ. If you're near Hunt Valley, come on over." I froze. In the center of the frame was Hazel, my wife, in a vivid red maxi dress, hair in loose waves, lips painted bright red, laughing radiantly with a cocktail in hand. She had her arm around Ernest, my father-in-law, who was puffing a Cuban cigar and roaring with laughter alongside his businessman friends. Lorraine, my mother-in-law, sat in a wicker chair in an elegant silk dress, telling a story that had the whole table in stitches. Violet zoomed in on Hazel's face. "My sister Hazel is the prettiest tonight, hands down." Hazel beamed, raising her glass. "Cheers. To families." Not one of them was wearing black. Not one looked sad. Not one mentioned my father. I dropped the phone, hands shaking violently. The urgent matter Hazel had mentioned was this barbecue. While I was lowering my father into the ground, they were laughing, taking selfies, drinking expensive wine. Rage exploded inside me like wildfire. I didn't think. I grabbed my keys, stormed out of the house, and sped toward Hunt Valley. The rain was now pouring, the road slick, but I didn't care. Only one thought burned in my mind. I had to confront them. 30 minutes later, I screeched to a halt in front of the Montgomery estate. Party lights spilled onto the street. Music echoed. I walked through the open gate, no need to ring. It was wide open for guests. The smell of grilled meat, wine, and expensive perfume hit me like a wave, making my stomach churn. I strode into the backyard. Everyone paused for a second when they saw me. Soaked, clothes streaked with cemetery mud. Then they quickly returned to their laughter, their drinks, their conversations, as if I were just a smudge of dirt on their shoes. I walked straight to Hazel. She was sitting beside Ernest, giggling at some joke. "Hazel." My voice came out rough. She turned, smile freezing on her face. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "Why didn't you come to my father's funeral?" I asked directly, no beating around the bush. Hazel stared at me for a second, then let out a contemptuous laugh. A laugh I had never heard from her in 5 years of marriage. "Honey, I told you. I had something going on. Besides," she shrugged, "your dad's death is your family's business. I'm not obligated to share your family's grief." I reeled as if slapped. "Not obligated? You're my wife. He was your father-in-law." Ernest set his glass down with a sharp clink, looking at me with irritation. "Enough, Marcus. Don't make a scene. This is my family's party. Don't ruin the mood." Lorraine chimed in, voice sweet but cutting. "Your husband's right. Your father was just a janitor. He wasn't close to us. We were busy, we couldn't come. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Your dad simply wasn't important enough for us to cancel our weekend plans." Violet, sitting nearby, burst into giggles and aimed her phone at me, filming close up. "Oh my God, the drama. Everyone watch, my brother-in-law is losing it at our party." The relatives around the table, Montgomery aunts, uncles, cousins, quietly chewed their steaks, whispering and smirking openly. Not one defended me. Not one looked ashamed. Blood rushed to my head. My father was the most honorable man I ever knew. He worked his whole life, never hurt anyone, lived with kindness toward everyone. You have no right to insult him. Hazel shot to her feet, face flushed with wine and fury. "Are you insane, Marcus? You dare come here and make a spectacle at my family's party? A janitor is a janitor. What's wrong with saying it? Who do you think you are, demanding we bow to you?" Ernest slammed the table. "That's enough. Get out of my house." Lorraine added, "Don't make us call security." Violet kept filming, giggling. "Everyone look, my brother-in-law is crying. It's hilarious." I stood there in their backyard, soaked mud up to my ankles, while an entire family laughed at my pain. I lost control. For the first time in my life, I shouted at my wife to defend my father's honor. I told them how honorable he was, how much he had sacrificed, and that they weren't fit to touch his shoes. Hazel went berserk. She lunged at me, shoving me and screaming, "Get out, you loser, you pathetic pauper. I married the wrong man." Ernest jerked his chin and two security guards immediately stepped forward. They grabbed my arms and dragged me away like a trespasser. I was thrown out of their party amid the Montgomerys' mocking laughter. As I crossed the threshold, the iron gates slammed shut behind me with a cold, resounding clang. I drove home through torrential rain, the windshield blurring no matter how fast the wipers moved. On the way, memories stabbed like knives. I remembered the first meeting of the two families before our wedding 5 years ago. The first time my parents visited the Montgomery home. Dad wore his only suit, an old one from his youth, sat straight-backed and smiled kindly. Ernest had asked one question. "What do you do for a living, sir?" Dad answered, "I'm a janitor at Hartman Industries." The atmosphere changed instantly. Lorraine smirked. Ernest looked at Dad as if he were invisible. The whole evening they whispered among themselves, openly disdainful, while Mom only nodded with an awkward smile. Dad just smiled quietly, squeezing my hand under the table and whispering, "It's all right, son, as long as you're happy." Only now did I understand. Dad had endured it all for the fragile happiness I thought I had. When I got home, I sat in the car, unwilling to go inside. I clutched the steering wheel and cried like a child. I cried for Dad. I cried for 5 years of a sham marriage. I cried for myself, the fool who had been blind to their contempt from the very first day. I had no idea that those tears were only the beginning of a much larger storm about to break. I woke the next morning with swollen eyes and a head that felt like lead. Mom was still asleep. She was exhausted from yesterday. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, turning Mr. Franklin Hartman's business card over and over in my hand. The raised silver lettering glinted under the cheap neon light. I flipped it back and forth as if it might disappear if I let go. Finally, I picked up the phone and dialed. A woman's voice answered. "Hello, you've reached Mr. Hartman's secretary. How may I help you?" "Hello, this is Marcus Dillard. I spoke with Mr. Franklin yesterday. He told me to call this number." The secretary's tone instantly warmed. "Oh, hello, Mr. Marcus. Mr. Franklin has been expecting your call. Can you come to headquarters for a meeting with him at 10 a.m. today?" I agreed and promised to be on time. At 9:45, I was standing in front of Hartman Industries headquarters in downtown Baltimore. A sleek black glass tower more than 50 stories tall with a vast marble lobby. When I walked in, faded jeans, old jacket, shoes still caked with cemetery mud. The security guards looked me up and down, then bowed politely and escorted me straight to the top floor. The elevator doors opened and Franklin Hartman was already waiting in the hallway. No secretary, no assistants, just him. 80 years old, but still straight-backed, eyes sharp. "Marcus, thank you for coming." He shook my hand, his grip warm and firm. "Come in. We'll talk privately." His office was so large I felt tiny inside it. One wall was floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking all of Baltimore. The other was lined with bookshelves and old photographs. He motioned to a leather sofa, poured 2 glasses of water himself, and sat across from me. I spoke first, voice still hoarse. "Sir, yesterday you said there were things about my father I needed to know. I don't understand. My dad was just a janitor." Mr. Hartman looked at me for a long time, his gaze softening. He pulled a thick cream-colored envelope from a drawer. On the front, in my father's familiar handwriting, "To Marcus when I'm gone." He placed it in my hands. "Before you read this, let me tell you a story." And he began. More than 40 years ago, when Hartman Industries was nothing but a tiny medical equipment repair shop on the outskirts of town, Franklin Hartman, then around 40 and on the verge of bankruptcy, met my father, a brilliant mechanical engineer who had just been fired for refusing to cut corners at his previous company. Dad had no money, only ideas and his own 2 hands. He helped Franklin redesign the entire production line, slashed costs, and tripled output in 6 months. From that moment, they became best friends. Franklin said Dad refused to become a director or have a private office. He only said, "I like working with my hands and I want to be home by 5 to play with my son." When the company went public, Franklin wanted Dad listed as co-founder. Dad shook his head. "I don't need fame. Give me shares, but keep my name off the public records. I just want my son to grow up normal, not spoiled by money." And Franklin honored that promise. For 40 years, my father wore a janitor's uniform, swept the lobby, cleaned the elevators. But twice a week, he sat with Franklin late into the night planning strategy, reviewing financial reports, making decisions worth hundreds of millions. No one knew. No one except Franklin and a handful of trusted lawyers. Mr. Hartman's voice dropped. "Your father was the real brain behind Hartman Industries, Marcus. Right now, his shares are worth roughly $400 million. My ears rang. 400 million. Not 400,000, 400 million US dollars. I stared at him, mouth open, unable to speak. My father, the man who skipped breakfast to buy me milk, who patched his old shoes until they fell apart, had been a silent multimillionaire. Mr. Hartman continued. He asked me to keep it secret until he was gone. Now you know. I placed a trembling hand on the envelope. Thank you. I don't know what to say. He only smiled sadly. Read the letter, son. He wrote it for you. I drove home like a man in a trance. My mind spun. $400 million. My father. Janitor. Millionaire. The two words couldn't coexist, yet they were one and the same. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table, hands shaking as I opened the envelope. Dad's familiar slanted handwriting appeared on the very first line. Marcus, my beloved son, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you and your mother. I'm sorry I kept this secret until I was gone. The thing I feared most was not that you would be poor, but that money would make you lose yourself. I have always been proud of you, Marcus. From the day you first rolled over as a baby to the day you put on your technician's uniform, I never doubted you for a second. You are the greatest joy of my life. I know the Montgomery family looks down on us. I know they laugh behind our backs, call me the janitor. I'm not angry. I only feel sorry that you have to live among such people. But I believe that one day you will understand. A person's worth is not in money or status, but in how they treat others. All the shares I leave to you and your mother. You have full authority to decide what to do with them. Use them to live more openly, more beautifully, but never forget. Money is only a tool. Love is the root. Take care of your mother for me. Finish the road I could not complete. And remember, I will always love you. Dad. I finished reading and tears fell onto the paper, blurring the last lines. Memories of Dad flooded back like an old film reel. I remembered the afternoons he pedaled me to Inner Harbor Park on his bike, buying me a 5-cent ice pop even when he had only a few coins left in his pocket. The nights he sat fixing my old bicycle, patiently teaching me, whatever you do, Marcus, do it properly, never half-heartedly. The simple dinners of mashed potatoes and sausage when he always gave me the best piece, smiling gently. My boy is growing. He needs to eat well. Dad had hidden an entire empire just so I could grow up ordinary. He had silently endured the Montgomery's scorn so money wouldn't ruin me. He had lived so humbly that the world never knew who he really was. Yet he was the greatest man I had ever known. I folded the letter, pressed it to my chest, and sobbed. Not because of the money, but because at last I understood who my father truly was. In that moment, every value, every belief, every dream of mine changed forever. I was no longer Marcus Dillard, the poor elevator technician from Dundalk. I was the son of Raymond Dillard, the quiet man who had built an empire with intellect and kindness. The days that followed passed in heavy silence. Hazel still lived in the house, but she was like a ghost. She left early in the morning before I woke up and came home very late, sometimes sleeping in the study with the excuse of deadlines. We didn't speak a single word to each other. She looked at me as if I were invisible, and I no longer bothered to look back. I was no longer angry. Only a cold emptiness remained. I spent all my time with Mom, with my elevator repair work, and quietly waiting for the tribute ceremony for my father, Raymond Dillard, that Mr. Franklin had promised when I left his office after our meeting. I kept everything secret. I didn't tell Mom because she was still fragile. I told no one in Dundalk, and above all, I said nothing to the Montgomery family. I wanted them to hear the news from the media, from television, from people's mouths, the same way they had once mocked my father. The ceremony took place on a radiant Wednesday morning in the grand auditorium of Hartman Industries in Baltimore. The hall seated over 1,000, and it was packed. Press, television crews, major and minor shareholders, international partners, everyone was there. Mom and I sat in the front row reserved for family. I wore a brand new black suit that Mr. Hartman had someone deliver to our house. Mom sat beside me. She still didn't know the full truth and thought this was just a tribute to a longtime employee. The stage lights dimmed. The giant LED screen lit up. Images of my father appeared. Not the stooped old janitor scrubbing floors, but Raymond Dillard 50 years ago. Young, eyes bright, holding blueprints, standing beside a young Franklin Hartman in the tiny old repair shop. Then more photos. Dad sitting at board meetings, signing major contracts, smiling broadly the day the company went public. Finally, the most recent picture. Dad in his janitor's uniform, smiling gently in front of the Hartman building. The entire hall fell silent. Mr. Franklin Hartman walked onto the stage. His voice, deep and warm, rang through the microphone. Today, Hartman Industries is not only honoring our veteran employees. We are honoring a co-founder, a brilliant mind, my friend, Mr. Raymond Dillard. For 45 years, he chose to live in anonymity, chose a mop and bucket over the chairman's office simply to protect his family from the glare of empty fame. He is the reason Hartman Industries exists today. He told the story of their first meeting, the sleepless nights planning strategy. The times Dad refused fame just to be home by 5 to play with my son. When he reached the final line, Raymond Dillard was our largest founding shareholder, and his will has passed everything to his son, Marcus Dillard. The entire hall rose in thunderous applause. I stood and bowed. Cameras zoomed in on my face. I spoke briefly. My father taught me that a person's worth is not in money. Thank you, Dad. The news exploded that same afternoon. Secret janitor owned $400 million in Hartman Industries shares. The quiet sweeper who was actually a founding millionaire. From tiny repair shop to billion-dollar empire, thanks to one janitor. Local Maryland channels, then CNN and CNBC, all ran the story. Social media was flooded with photos of my father. People called him America's most humble millionaire. In Dundalk, old neighbors called Mom so much the phone lines jammed, and the Montgomery family went completely silent. When I returned home after the ceremony, I opened the door and found the entire Montgomery family already sitting in my living room. Hazel sat in the middle of the sofa, dressed in neat office attire, makeup perfect but eyes slightly red. Ernest and Lorraine sat on either side, looking serious yet visibly uncomfortable. Violet huddled in the corner, head down, not daring to meet my eyes. Hazel stood first, voice trembling. "Marcus, you're back. We need to talk." I closed the door, took off my coat, and calmly sat across from them. I said nothing, just looked at them. Ernest cleared his throat first. "Marcus, we saw the news. We truly never imagined Mr. Raymond was..." Lorraine cut in, eyes glistening theatrically. "Dear, we're sorry. We were wrong to treat you that way at the party. We're family, after all." Hazel stepped forward and actually knelt in front of me, grasping my hands. "Honey, I was wrong. I shouldn't have skipped your father's funeral. Please forgive me. I want to make it right. Can we start over?" I gently pulled my hands away, still unnaturally calm. "I've changed now. I'm no longer the husband who just took everything lying down. Ernest forced an awkward smile and quickly changed the subject. Oh, by the way, Marcus, our company has a new project. Very promising, needs capital to expand. With your shares now, if we partner up, it would be fantastic. You'd only need to invest a little. We guarantee double the return. Lorraine added sweetly, exactly. We're family now, we help each other. And Violet wants to apologize too, don't you, dear? Violet mumbled, face flushed. Yes. Sorry, brother-in-law. Hazel looked at me, eyes pleading. Honey, I'll change. I'll take care of your mom, take care of you. We'll buy a new house, have a happy, comfortable life. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it wide. I need time to sort things out, I said evenly. Right now, I'm not ready to talk more. Ernest stammered, but Marcus, we're family. I said I need time. I looked him straight in the eye. Please leave. I need to rest. They stood awkwardly. Lorraine tried to hug me. I stepped aside. Violet shuffled past with her head down. Hazel kept trying to persuade me, but I didn't want to hear it. I walked into the bedroom, closed the door, and left her out there with her regrets for the contempt she had shown my father. The days that followed, Hazel suddenly changed. She woke early to make breakfast. Heart-shaped fried eggs, homemade strawberry jam, coffee brewed in the Vietnamese fin exactly the way I liked it when we were newly in love. She set the plate in front of me with a sweetness I had never heard before. Eat it while it's hot, honey. I spent an hour on this. I only nodded, ate a few bites, then stood up to leave for work. No thank you, no smile. I could clearly see the anxiety in her eyes outweighing any affection. In the evenings, she wore thin nightgowns, pressed herself against me on the sofa, stroking my arm. Are you tired, love? Let me massage your shoulders? I gently removed her hand and said softly, I'm fine. Go to sleep. She bit her lip, eyes glistening, but dared say no more. I knew she was afraid of losing the glittering future that had just appeared before her. 3 days later, the phone rang. It was Ernest. His voice dripped with false warmth. Marcus, this weekend we're having a small family dinner, just us. Come over. Let's mend things, all right, son? I was silent for a few seconds, then answered, I'll be there. I clearly heard him exhale in relief on the other end. Sunday, I drove to Hunt Valley. The Montgomery mansion was lit up. The outdoor dining table was elaborately decorated. White silk tablecloth, imported roses, scented candles, a live jazz trio playing softly. Ernest wore a navy suit, Lorraine a flowing silk gown, Violet a princess dress, and Hazel. Hazel wore a tight red dress with a plunging neckline, hair in loose waves, lips bright red, breathtakingly beautiful. They greeted me like royalty. Ernest hugged me tightly. My son-in-law is here. Come in, come in. Lorraine air-kissed both my cheeks. Oh, Marcus, you look so different now, so handsome. Violet mumbled, Hi, brother-in-law. Dinner began. They kept raising glasses with honeyed toasts. To Marcus, the most successful man in our family. Ernest laughed loudly. To our grandson, now the pride of the whole family. Lorraine piled Wagyu beef onto my plate. Hazel poured wine, deliberately brushing my hand, eyes sparkling. Drink, honey. I chose this bottle specially for you. I ate slowly, watching. I saw everything. The greedy glint in their eyes whenever they mentioned the future. Violet's forced smile as she remembered her live stream. Hazel's hand trembling slightly as she served me. When dessert arrived, tiramisu dusted with gold leaf, Ernest cleared his throat and changed the subject. Marcus, the company is having a little cash flow issue. With the capital you have now, if you invested just a small part, we'd get through the crisis instantly. You'll help family, won't you? Lorraine smiled charmingly. Exactly, dear. Now that you're rich, you have to help your relatives. And Violet wants to study in England. Fees are a bit high. Hazel chimed in, voice syrupy. I just want to help you manage the assets. You're so busy. Let me handle it. I studied communications. I know how to build image too. We'll be Marilyn's ultimate power couple. I set down my spoon, wiped my mouth, and pulled a thick stack of papers from my inner pocket, divorce papers already signed, and placed them gently on the table. The room fell dead silent. Only the jazz kept playing. I spoke, voice perfectly calm. We're getting divorced, Hazel. Sign it. Hazel's face went white. Her hand shook as she took the papers. What did you say? Divorce. You heard me. She shot to her feet, voice trembling. Are you insane? Now that you're rich, you're kicking me out? What did I ever do wrong? I stayed with you through all those poor years, and the moment you have money, you dump me, you bastard. Ernest slammed the table. You insolent little... I humbled myself to accept your dirt-poor family so you could marry my daughter. Now you have a bit of money and turn on us? Ungrateful brat. Lorraine pointed at my face. You think money lets you do whatever you want? Dream on. I'll sue you in court. You'll lose everything. I stood, looked each of them in the eye, voice still even. If any of you had cared about me even a little, you would have been at my father's funeral. But you chose barbecue and wine. You laughed while I was in the deepest pain. Now that I have money, you remember I'm family? Sorry, too late. No one could speak. Hazel collapsed back into her chair, sobbing, not for me, but for the fortune slipping from her grasp. Ernest's face turned purple. Lorraine clutched her chest, gasping. Violet stared at the floor, tears falling onto her dress. I turned and walked out. No one dared stop me. At the car, I rolled down the window and breathed in the night air of Hunt Valley. For the first time in days, my heart felt strangely light, peaceful in a way I had never known. I drove back to Dundalk with the radio playing an old song Dad loved. I smiled at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Dad, I did the right thing, didn't I? And I knew. The real downfall of the Montgomery family had only just begun. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Hazel signed without even reading carefully, just slashing her pen across the page as if she wanted to tear the paper apart. I asked for nothing. She kept the house in Dundalk. I took only my clothes and a few personal items. I moved with Mom to a new apartment in Inner Harbor, Baltimore. High-rise, bay view, sunlight pouring into the kitchen every morning. Mom loved it because of the small balcony where she could grow flowers, and she said, "It feels closer to your father here. You can see the whole sky." Mr. Franklin Hartman called me to start work the week after the divorce. Not because of the shares, he made that clear, but because you have your father's qualities, perseverance, and vision. I began as a mid-level project manager in the smart elevator and automated building systems division, exactly my expertise. The salary was 5 times my old one, but I didn't spend lavishly. I still drove the old pickup, still wore simple shirts. The only difference was that now I made decisions on projects worth hundreds of millions. I worked like a man possessed. At the office by 6 a.m., home at 8 p.m., weekends on the laptop. Not for money. I wanted to prove I was worthy on my own merits, not because of Dad. 6 months later, I was promoted to department director. A year later, I joined the board of directors. Not because of my shares, but because the wireless elevator project I led won the largest contract in company history. Life slowly became stable, even happy. Mom grew stronger with regular exercise, tending her flowers every day, cooking Dad's favorite dishes, sitting on the balcony at night watching the city lights and telling old stories. I bought her a big TV. She laughed and said, "All I need is for you to come home and eat with me." And every morning when I woke and saw the sunrise over Chesapeake Bay, I whispered, "I'm trying every day, Dad." While I rose, the Montgomerys fell. Ernest's kitchen equipment company, already struggling, collapsed when clients canceled contracts en masse over faulty machines and terrible service. Suppliers seized assets, banks foreclosed, and within 4 months he declared bankruptcy. The Hunt Valley mansion was auctioned, luxury cars traded for an old Toyota, and the couple moved to a 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts. The people who once flattered them now turned away. No more invitations, no more handshakes, only closed doors. Hazel lost her job first. Old posts were dug up. Violet's live stream from the barbecue, the clips of her calling my father just a janitor, went viral. Her PR firm fired her instantly for brand damage. She jumped jobs a few times, but no one would hire her. Her reputation was shattered. Then one rainy afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it and there stood Hazel. She had grown painfully thin, dark circles under her eyes, hair messy, wearing a faded old coat. No makeup, no designer bag, only red-rimmed eyes and a hoarse voice. "Marcus, can I come in?" I was silent for a moment, then opened the door. She stepped inside, looked around the simple but warm apartment, then collapsed onto the sofa and buried her face in her hands, sobbing. "I have nothing left, Marcus. Mom and Dad lost everything. I lost my job, my friends, everything. It's my fault. I was wrong. I've known it for a long time but didn't dare admit it. You're all I have left. Can you forgive me? I swear I'll change." I poured her a glass of water, set it on the table, and sat across from her. "Hazel, I'm not angry with you anymore, but I don't love you anymore either. We're finished." She looked up, eyes desperate. "Can't you give me one more chance? I'll start over. I'll take care of your mom. No." I cut her off, calm but firm. "You had your chance. The day of my father's funeral was your last chance. You chose a barbecue. It's too late now." My words were the final blow. Hazel shot to her feet, eyes wild, face crimson. She shook violently, voice shrill and broken. "You bastard! Who do you think you are? You get rich and look down on me. I stayed with you through all those broke years, and now you dump me the minute you have money. I curse you." She lunged, smashing a vase, knocking picture frames to the floor, spilling water everywhere. I stood still, not stopping her, just stepping back. She screamed like a mad woman, tears and snot mixing, hair wild, completely out of control. Then suddenly she stopped, panting, looked at the wreckage, and collapsed again, sobbing into her hands. Without another word, she ran out, heels echoing down the hallway. I stood in the middle of the mess. My heart didn't hurt. Only a cold unease remained. I realized Hazel was no longer the wife I had once loved. She had broken inside, and that brokenness was more dangerous than I had thought. I cleaned up the shards, wiped the floor, then sat on the sofa and looked out the window. Rain was still falling steadily outside. I understood that the story between me and the Montgomery family was not truly over yet. The days that followed, I lived in a state of constant alertness and unease after Hazel's last visit. By day, I still went to work, attended meetings, laughed with colleagues. But the moment I stepped out of the Hartman building, I kept looking over my shoulder. The feeling of being watched clung to me like a dark shadow. I noticed a figure standing in the rain without an umbrella, saw camera flashes from the bushes across from my apartment. No proof, just instinct. But that instinct was enough to chill my blood. Nights were even worse. My phone rang nonstop from unknown numbers. Every time I answered, there was only heavy, rasping breathing or a long silence that made my heart stop. Once I heard a woman sobbing hysterically, then manic laughter. I changed my number, but 2 days later the calls started again. I turned the phone off, yet sleep still wouldn't come. The image of Hazel that day, eyes bloodshot, hair wild, screaming, appeared every time I closed my eyes. I started taking sleeping pills, but they only left me more exhausted. One gray Friday afternoon in Baltimore, I left work late. I was driving south on I-83, a quiet stretch since most people had gone home early. I played soft music, trying to relax, but my head still buzzed. Suddenly, in the rearview mirror, I saw a pair of blinding headlights charging toward me at insane speed. The car, I recognized it instantly, Hazel's old Audi, swerved into the right lane, then cut sharply straight at my front bumper. My heart stopped. I slammed the brakes and jerked the wheel right to avoid a head-on collision. Tires screeched on the wet road. The Audi grazed my hood by inches and shot past, but I had turned too hard on the slick surface. I lost control completely. My truck smashed into the concrete median. The crash was deafening, metal crumpling, windshield shattering, airbag punching me in the face. The truck spun half a turn, flipped onto its side, and came to rest. The last things I heard were my own scream and Hazel's, from her car, before everything went black. When I opened my eyes, the smell of antiseptic hit me. I was in a hospital bed, IV in my arm, head wrapped in thick bandages, every inch of my body aching but miraculously alive. Mom sat beside me, eyes red, clutching my hand. "You're awake. I thought I'd lost you." She broke into sobs. "Just a mild concussion, a few cracked ribs and countless cuts. The doctor said I was lucky. Old truck but solid, and the airbag saved my life." I didn't dare ask about Hazel right away. 2 officers came the next morning, one older, one younger, voices grave. "Mr. Marcus Dillard, we have preliminary findings on the accident. The driver of the Audi was Ms. Hazel Montgomery, your ex-wife. Traffic cameras and your dash cam recorded everything clearly. She deliberately rammed your vehicle at over 100 miles per hour. Fortunately, you swerved in time. Her car only clipped yours and came to a stop on the shoulder without flipping. She sustained minor injuries, but when police arrived, she was in an extreme psychotic state, screaming and repeatedly banging her head against the steering wheel." I sat silent, throat dry. "Ms. Montgomery has been transferred to Johns Hopkins Psychiatric Ward. Doctors diagnosed severe mental disorder with signs of delusion and self-harm, suicidal ideation. Medical records show a prior history of untreated depression. The case will be closed as she is no longer competent to stand trial." They took a brief statement and left. I lay staring at the white ceiling. No tears, no anger, only a cold emptiness. A few weeks later, after I was discharged and back to normal work, the apartment doorbell rang. I opened it and barely recognized the 2 people standing there. Ernest and Lorraine Montgomery. They looked 10 years older than the last time I saw them. Ernest's hair was completely white, his back stooped, wearing a threadbare coat. Lorraine had no makeup, dark circles under her eyes, clutching a cheap purse. They stood trembling in the cold hallway. Ernest dropped to his knees first, then Lorraine knelt too. Both wept. "Marcus, we're sorry." His voice broke. "We were wrong from the very beginning. We were arrogant, selfish, looked down on your father, looked down on you. We spoiled Hazel until she became this. Now she's in a psychiatric hospital. Doctors say she may never recover, then it's all our fault." Lorraine clutched my legs, sobbing. "Please forgive us, grandson. We have no face left. Just forgive us so we can close our eyes in peace." I stood silent for a long time. My father's words from his letter echoed in my mind. "Son, let kindness and success answer for hatred." I bent down and helped them both to their feet. "I forgive you. I don't want to carry hatred anymore. I only hope Hazel recovers soon and that you both live well for whatever time you have left." They cried harder, hugged me tightly, then quietly left. I closed the door, leaned against the wall, and let out a long breath. The greatest pain of my life had finally come to an end. I stepped out onto the balcony, gazing down at the city of Baltimore glittering with nighttime lights. A cool breeze brushed my face, carrying the scent of the harbor and a faint trace of flowers from Mom's potted plants. "Dad, I did it. I lived the way you taught me." I stood there a long time, letting the wind dry the last tears on my cheeks. Down below, streams of cars flowed like the city's bloodstream. People were living their lives, some happy, some suffering, some laughing, some crying. And I, after everything that had happened, had finally found true peace. My story is not a fairy tale. There is no prince on a white horse, no magic that turns a toad into royalty. There was only an ordinary father, an elevator janitor, who silently built an empire not for fame, but so his son could grow up surrounded by love and human values. And there was only a son, me, who nearly lost himself chasing approval from people who were never worthy of it. Looking back on that journey, I realized life is like one of the old elevators my father repaired every day. Sometimes it gets stuck between floors, sometimes it shakes violently. But if you stay calm and press the right button, it will carry you to where you truly belong. The greatest thing my father left me, and the message I want to pass on to everyone reading this, is the truth he lived by his whole life. A person's worth is not in their wallet, their title, or the way the world judges them. It lies in the kindness they show others, in what they are willing to sacrifice, and in whether they can remain true to themselves when everything around them turns dark. My father could have stood at the pinnacle of power, worn suits, sat in air-conditioned offices, and commanded thousands. Instead, he chose the mop, the faded blue uniform, and being home by 5 o'clock to take me to the park on his old bicycle. He chose to silently endure the Montgomerys' contempt so I would not be swept into the vortex of money and pride. That was the greatest love a father could give. And I once thought I was worthless because I was just an elevator technician with a modest wage in a small house in Dundalk. I tried to win the Montgomerys' favor, swallowed their mockery, believed that if I were richer, more respectable, Hazel would love me more. I was terribly wrong. Money only reveals character, it doesn't change it. The Montgomerys were wealthy, but their hearts were pitifully poor. When I was poor, they despised me. When I became rich, they knelt. That was never love. It was greed wearing the mask of family. So if you feel inferior because of a humble background, manual work, or lack of a fancy house and car, stop. Be proud. The people who live humbly, work hard, and love their families with all their hearts are the truly great ones. They don't need anyone's recognition. Their value shines from within. I also learned something else. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is the gift you give yourself. I once hated Hazel. I once hated Ernest and Lorraine. I once wanted them to suffer 100 times over. But when I saw them kneeling before me, old broken eyes filled with remorse, I suddenly understood revenge would not make me stronger. It would only make me like them. By forgiving them, I became truly free. I didn't forgive because they deserved it, but because I refused to carry that burden for the rest of my life. If you are holding a grudge against someone, an ex who betrayed you, a family that belittled you, friends who turned away, try to forgive them one day. Not today, but someday. Because hatred is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Only forgiveness can heal you. And above all, I learned, never trade your character to please those who are unworthy. I once did that. I stayed silent when Hazel insulted my mother. I forced a smile when Ernest called my father the janitor. I thought enduring was noble, but enduring is not a virtue when it turns you into a coward. There are lines that must never be crossed, the honor of your parents, your own self-respect. When someone tramples those sacred things, stand up, not for revenge, but to protect yourself. And finally, my advice to everyone, especially the young who are falling in love and building families. Look at how they treat your parents, the waiter, the security guard, the street sweeper. That is their true character. Hazel smiled sweetly at me, but she scorned my father, the most important person in my life. That was a blazing red flag I ignored. Never marry someone who only loves you when you succeed. Marry someone who stays when you have nothing but your two empty hands. Money will come if you work hard and are capable. But character cannot be bought. Always choose character over money, always. And if one day you realize you are living with someone who looks down on where you came from, have the courage to leave. Being alone is better than being lonely inside your own home. Now I live in real peace. Every morning I make coffee for Mom and take her for a walk in the park. Lunch with colleagues, afternoon meetings, evenings reading or video calling Mr. Franklin, who has become like an uncle to me. At the end of each month I return to Dundalk, place white daisies on Dad's grave and tell him everything. I am not rich to show off. I am rich to do good. I created a scholarship fund in Dad's name for workers' children, quietly help struggling families in Dundalk, and live humbly as he taught me. Sometimes I still dream of Hazel, not the angry woman she became, but the young girl who once held my hand in the rain. I pray she recovers, that she finds peace, even if that path no longer includes me. Life is short. Live so that when you lie down for the last time, those left behind shed tears of love, not tears of regret. My father achieved that, and I, Marcus Dillard, son of a great janitor, will spend my whole life trying not to let him down. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for teaching me that. A janitor who lives with kindness is worth more than 1,000 rich people with narrow hearts. And if you are reading this, I hope my story helps you see more clearly the value of yourself, your family, and those who truly love you. Live kindly. Forgive when you can. Be proud of where you came from. And remember, money can buy a big house, but only love turns a house into a home. I, Marcus Dillard, have found that home, not in luxurious Hunt Valley, but right here in Baltimore, with Mom, with memories of Dad, and with a heart finally free of hatred. Thank you, life, for giving me a father like Raymond Dillard. And thank you for staying with this story to the very last line.